Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to join all of you from literally halfway around the world in Tallahassee, Florida. I am truly delighted to have the opportunity to share some observations about the changing roles and growing importance of institutional research within higher education. I plan to speak for about 20 minutes so that there is plenty of time for your questions and comments before our time together is over. So despite the differences in our time zones, locations, and job titles, all of us who are data professionals and work within the broad area of institutional research are experiencing rapid and disruptive changes brought on by innovations in technology and copious amounts of data. Our colleges and universities now have data warehouses, data lakes, data visualization, predictive models, analytic tools, chatbots, and machine learning, just to name a few. It is so easy to get caught up in the promises and hype surrounding these new shiny tools and techniques, or to be a bit overwhelmed by all these new advancements. It's no wonder we sometimes lose our perspective on why these technologies and techniques exist in the first place. The data and technology are merely the foundations for building and sustaining a culture that uses evidence to make decisions and take actions that facilitate student success and improve the educational experience. Now, it's certainly true that these new technologies and tools provide more data for more people within our colleges and universities. And this is a good thing. Advancements in techniques and tools mean it is easier to collect, to clean, transform, store, access, and report the data that is so important to our work. It's also true, however, that the new technologies and more data do not guarantee smart and effective decisions that make a difference in the lives of students or improve the operations of our institutions. I have to tell you that I often cringe when I hear the phrase data-driven decisions, because data doesn't make decisions. People make decisions. And people need knowledge, understanding, and context to make good decisions. People need to be able to make the sense of the data to take appropriate actions. This is the work of data sense making and the value of institutional research. Technology and tools play supporting roles, but they can't do the work of data sense making. Understanding and insight develop not in a machine, but in the mind of the sense maker. It is in the minds of people and through the interaction among individuals that most of the work is truly done. So what is data sense making? Data sense making is the ability to analyze, interpret, contextualize, and integrate. The ability to interrogate the data, to ask the right questions, to discover critical insights, and to communicate and share understanding. In a world of big data and ever-changing technologies, there is a growing need for institutional research leaders who have a deep understanding of both the institutional context and the technical challenges. We can be those vital translators whose views will be respected by all sides. We can serve a critical and essential role in transforming disparate pieces of data into information and establishing the understanding necessary for decision makers to solve problems and take actions for the benefit of our students, our institutions, and our communities. We are called to share our knowledge, experience, and skills to help build an institutional culture of evidence and inquiry. a culture where decisions are grounded in evidence and informed by the experience and context of the surrounding environment. Based on the output of a complicated algorithm or an anonymous predictive model created by an outside vendor or company. It's no longer enough to stay in our offices, run mandatory reports, respond to ad hoc data requests, and in the words of an association colleague, to be silently awesome. We must get out of our offices and be visibly and proactively awesome. We need to build partnerships across academic departments and business units and develop the structures and processes that support and sustain the wise and appropriate use of data and technology. So for many of us in IR, a more visible and proactive leadership role is new and perhaps a little bit daunting. Where does one start? And this is where associations like AAIR can help. In 2016, our association released the Statement of Aspirational Practice for Institutional Research. The statement is a model and a blueprint for this new vision of institutional research. And since that time, we have continued to work with leaders in the field to operationalize and to refine the statement. So here's a quick overview of the 4 principles and a few examples of how the statement is being applied in the field to build this culture of evidence-based decision-making. So the first principle is a student-focused paradigm. A focus on students centers and grounds the work of institutional research and prioritizes efforts to improve the student experience and increase student progress and completion. Now, I know that student-related analysis does not encompass the full range of the work done by IR professionals, but student success does serve as a common priority that is shared by nearly all institutions across the world. The second principle is an expanded definition of decision makers. This recognizes the need to expand the community of decision makers and empower many stakeholder groups within an institution, particularly faculty, frontline staff, and the students themselves, so that these groups have access to information and analytic tools and the necessary knowledge to shape decisions. The third principle is a broad data and analytics function. Instead of thinking about institutional research happening in just one office, consider a collection of offices across the campus that are producing, analyzing, and interpreting data for decision makers. Now, an important implication of this broader function is the need to grow and expand data use and data literacy, not just for those of us in IR, but we also have the responsibility to share and transfer our knowledge to others within our institution. And finally, the fourth principle, executive IR leadership. There is a need for an executive leader for this data and analytics function, a senior level person who contributes to strategic planning, manages data governance, and builds productive partnerships across other business units. So working at the executive level is not a typical role for some in IR, but based on what we've heard from the field, it is critical for bringing together different information sources, analytics tools, and data users into a coordinated institution-wide data strategy. So as an example of applying these 4 principles, I have an IR colleague named Archie who is at a large urban open access college here in Florida. The college had made a significant investment in providing access to data, to tools, to the staff on the front lines who work every day with our students. However, Archie still saw a skills and knowledge gap. The staff was frustrated. They didn't know how to make sense of the data and turn it into action to truly help students. So he started a series of data boot camps and trained data champions that were in each business unit across the campus. The IR staff became not just data providers, but data teachers, data users, and data coaches. Institutional research professionals can also lead critical conversations and work to break down both data and people silos. Because we all know that data integration is not just about technically combining data sets, but people sharing knowledge and expertise to make sense of the data itself. So I have another colleague named Laura. She's at a small private college in California, and she works hard to empower others to use data. As a 1.5 person IR shop, Laura loves committees and staff partnerships. She invests a significant amount of time in building relationships and connecting people with information. She doesn't believe in simply handing people data. Laura's goal is for her colleagues to own their data, so it is no longer the IR data, but it's the department's data that they use regularly to evaluate their performance and make improvements. My final example is from a large public research university in Arizona. Hank is committed to fostering a culture of inquiry as an IR leader. His goal is to make good data available, usable, and actionable. He believes that requires 3 things. IR needs to be visible and knowable across the institution. IR needs to earn people's trust around data quality and data reliability. And IR needs to work on relationships at multiple levels to understand and to foster internal networks to truly make a difference. So in sum, I believe that as powerful and as sexy as they may appear, more data and new technologies are just one part of creating an evidence-based decision culture at our colleges and universities. To build and sustain a strong culture of inquiry, institutions must connect people with information and knowledge. Leaders must create organizational structures, habits, and processes that reinforce the use of data at all levels of the organization. Individuals across the institution must have the skills and knowledge to make sense of what the data and technology are providing. Institutional research professionals must be those data sense makers who use their expert knowledge and experience to interpret and transform data into understanding. And to do that well, all of us in IR need to play a proactive and collaborative leadership role within our colleges and universities. In closing, I want to extend a personal invitation to each of you to join and become more involved in AAIR and take advantage of our educational opportunities, resources, and connections with the IR community. Our purpose is to be a global association that empowers higher educational professionals to use data, information, analytics, and evidence to make better decisions and take actions that improve higher education. And to do that, we need the talents and contributions of individuals like you from around the world. Thank you.
you, Christine. I'm going to do some questioning now. So there's a few people going to ask some questions. I'm sorry, Kathy, Christine can't see us at the moment. So if you have a question, can you put your hand up now so that Andrea and Kathy can see you? We're just getting sorted, Christine.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Christine, I'm going to take advantage of holding on to the microphone because I think people are still a little bit asleep here. When you say that AAIR wants to be a global institution, you have a lot of affiliated organizations around the world. Do you see that continuing, or do you see them coming under a stronger umbrella for AAIR?
I would see the affiliated organizations continuing to be definitely continuing to be their own organizations, because I think it's a both and. I know that the affiliated organizations, whether it be in different regions of the United States or throughout the world, really are grounded in their own area, their own region, and can really serve the needs of that community. And what I'd hope to do is then to have AAIR become a broader umbrella organization where we could bring some of the lessons and learnings from each of the affiliated organizations within our broader association. So I definitely think there's a role for both the broader organization as well as the different affiliated organizations.
Thanks, Christine.
We do have a question. Okay, my name's Michael Baker from Altus Consulting here in Sydney, and my question is actually around the, you made a really good point about the sexy new technologies such as data lakes and machine learnings and all those things being really attractive, and how there's potentially it's not the solution to everyone's problem. So I was just wondering if you had any examples or stories you could share about the ways people have explored these new technologies in not so productive ways, some cautionary tales, and how we try and take advantage of these new tech.
Sure, and I'm actually going to implicate myself in this. So I used to work in institutional research at the University of Kansas, and our School of Education was undergoing accreditation for the school. And they had in the United States, the accreditation process for teacher education requires a lot of data. And so they decided there was a new technology that shall remain nameless that was going to solve all our data collection and data issue problems. What everyone forgot was that there actually needed to be data that was in the system. Once we installed the software, everyone thought that that tool would simply be able to provide the reports and the assessments they need without thinking about the quality of the data that went into the system, or what sort of impact that data would have on the decisions for reforming teacher education. So that's the one that I always think about, because everyone was so excited about the technology and the ability to pull all the information together. They forgot about the quality of the data that would go into the system itself. The other piece that I think is really, really important, and we've seen this on several campuses, is as data and analytic tools are spread out across campus, that are situated in departments that don't necessarily work with data on a regular basis, that there's this danger of using the data, producing reports without really checking to see if the comparisons make sense, if you're looking at data that actually can help the students, if it fits in with the larger institutional context. And I think that's one of the things that Archie was seeing at well, it's at Miami-Dade College here in Florida, that they had the data, they had the information, but there wasn't enough. They didn't know what to do with it to actually make a change in their advising structures, or to figure out how to better reach students who are in danger of dropping out or not re-enrolling in classes the next semester.
I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question as well, like Kathy did.
Sure.
Christine and Andrea. I really like what your quote about not being silently awesome, and the idea of really bringing, I guess, the human side to the data, bringing people into the data. I think probably, I don't think I'm going to be unreasonable in saying that sometimes people who have exceptional skills in analytics don't always naturally feel inclined to get out there and talk to people. Some do, but some not so much. What can leaders do to help to encourage their teams and to make them see the importance of getting out there, engaging with the people who use the data, and really encouraging that ownership of the data, as you were saying as well?
I think that's really critical. Some of the examples I've heard from different IR directors and leaders is they've started to do it in small increments. So they bring along the assistant director or an analyst with them to a meeting in a department, an academic department, and have that person about the data in a situation that's lower stakes, and where they get comfortable and excited about the work they have done and the ability to explain it to another person. So they've done this little by little to bring folks along. Also, there are a couple people offices who have asked other people from across the institution to come to them. So they've had IR open houses where they showcase the work that they've done in institutions. They've called it data and wine, or data or wine and cheese, and brought people in to really share the work that they're doing. So then you start to build those connections on a one-on-one basis. I also think that some of the work we're trying to do here is we really see a need to help individuals develop those skills and become more comfortable kind of getting out of the office. And we're trying to put together a set of courses and leadership development that people can take to help learn those skills. And again, I think that's another important role for the regional, the affiliated associations. Where can you start to do those presentations in a way that you can share your knowledge and expertise with your colleagues and help get more comfortable with this idea of getting out of the office and communicating with different audiences who have different levels of understanding about data. So those are just a few of the opportunities and options I've heard from colleagues.
Hi, Rob Dellitz from the University of Canberra. A fair bit of what I understand you're talking about is actually how decisions are made in the universities and the sort of logic and processes that sit behind that. So talking about getting a senior executive, supporting, driving institutional research, getting out and talking to people, without trying to sound, I don't know whether the word's cynical, but universities tend to be very path dependent in decision-making processes, and the logic of why they exist, how they operate, and people work in their own worlds. And the sort of people we are, we cut across that, often in invisible ways to them. And some of what I think you're perhaps saying is trying to actually get and change the world view of how decisions are made in universities. And could you talk on that?
Certainly, it's an important point. So how can someone who's in an institutional research who may not have a seat at the president's cabinet, or who may not, so how do you get from being in the middle of the organization to move into a role where you perhaps have influence and have input to those more strategic decisions? And I think there are a couple pieces of that. Certainly, I've seen opportunities that are created by college presidents and college chancellors who really see the value of institution, and having that senior leadership commitment helps bring IR into a more visible role. And of course, that's the ideal, and that's certainly something that we'd all like to have occur at our institution. However, I think that the ability to influence decision-making can occur at any level of the organization. I heard a colleague a couple of weeks ago at an IT conference speak about this very passionately, in the sense that by building relationships with other departments and with other areas within the organization, whether that be with information technology, whether that be with student affairs, whether that be with your advising department, that you can really help influence those decisions and help share your knowledge with them. That influence doesn't necessarily have to be from a position of power, but that you can also, by building those partnerships and building those relationships, really help make a difference in those decisions that are happening kind of in the middle of the organization, without really being sitting at that president's cabinet level. You know, Tim Stanley is his name, and he works at the University of and if you've had a chance to hear him speak, I would definitely, he's been on a couple webinars for us and really talks about this ability to influence and shape decisions from the middle of the organization. So if you have a chance to hear him, I really encourage you to listen, because I really think that's an important piece. It's just not about going up to the highest level, but really within your sphere of influence, help make those decisions better. How can you use your knowledge of data and information from across the university to make a difference in your relationships with IT or student affairs? I think that piece is also very, very critical to creating this entire culture of inquiry and evidence.
Do you have any final questions? One more.
Okay.
Lucky last. I'm Alice from QUT. With all this new technology, I guess there's a temptation to pick up a roadmap or a template and just adopt and go on with it. But I'm just interested in your thoughts on potential pitfalls of just following, you know, kind of a textbook approach or a template adoption process.
I think that is important, because I think that one of the efforts I'm involved with here in the United States is the Gates Foundation is really interested in how we can transform higher education and close achievement gaps between racial and ethnic groups here in the US. And there is groups of us who are trying to figure out how we can take the good things that are happening at one institution and kind of transfer them to another institution. And they started out with this idea of solutions. So technology is solution, digital learning, intrusive advice systems, and just starting, if you just implemented those, then you would increase student success. And what we're beginning to learn is that it's not just about that technology, that the institutional context matters so much. And in order for a new technology to work, you also have to have these institutional capacities to take that technology and really modify it, adapt it so it works within this context. And some of those capacities that have been found through this work include institutional research. They include information technology. They include strategic finance. They include also policy. So what are the institutional policies? And they also include this idea of leadership. So how do you have a leadership at all levels of the organization that really help and support whatever the solution that may be? So I think that is one way of thinking about a solution. You have the solution, you have the technology, you have the shiny new thing, but what are those capacities that your institution has to really help adapt that technology to make it work in organizational context, to really help promote those equity goals, those student success goals that your institution wants to achieve.
Thanks, Christine. I think we're at the very end.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christine, for making that great presentation, for opening our conference and forum here. You've really set the scene for what we want. And a lot of what you're talking about resonates very much in this part of the world. The evidence-based decision-making we hear that regularly. I'm sure in all our institutions, we particularly do in New Zealand, and I think Australia is the same, and across the Pacific. So you're obviously speaking our language, or we're speaking your language. We didn't get lost in translation between the US and back down
Excellent.
here. Yes, so thank you very much. And I would reinforce to other people about the benefits of AAIR and the learning opportunities that you provide. I participated in one of those a couple of years ago and got a great deal out of it, so it's really good. But thank you for staying up late. I think it's about 7 o'clock at night for you on a...
Oh, it's only 5:30. It's easy.
Oh, that's
it's
early. So thank you for opening, and if I could get everyone just to thank Christine for